Chapter 25. Grandpa Zong was finally shocked. Born with great strength? He then shook his head. I forgot, you practice external hard martial arts, so it's not surprising that you have a bit more strength. Archery isn't just about having great strength. Take this. Grandpa Zong took the hunting bow from his back and tossed it to Li Qingshan. This is Grandpa Zhang's bullhorn bow. It weighs 1 stone. This is Grandpa Zhang's intention to make things difficult for that kid. Drawing a bow and throwing a stone lock are 2 different things. 1 stone was 120 kilograms. Normal hunting bows did not pursue power, but precision and dexterity. It was rare to find such a hard bow. If the bow was too hard, its power would increase, but if the person using the bow could not control it, the accuracy and shooting speed would be very poor. If they encountered a wild beast in the mountains, they would not be able to shoot the second arrow in time and the beast would pounce on them. Only death would await them. However, hunters who could use this kind of hard bow were all godly archers. Killing tigers and leopards in the mountains was not a problem. Li Qingshan weighed the hunting bow in his hand. It was a fine oak bow, wrapped in animal skin and wrapped in silk. The bowstring was made of ox tendon. It was light in the hand, but it was very powerful. He followed the method that Grandpa Zong had taught him just now. He lowered his waist into a horse stance and pulled the bowstring. The muscles in his body also relaxed. Grandpa Zong was surprised to find that his posture was very accurate. He remembered that he just now was watching from the side, so he gave him some pointers. Li Qingshan understood everything. In just a moment, it felt like he had put in 3 months of hard work. When learning to draw a bow, it was not easy to use a bow that was too hard. One had to start with a soft bow and shoot many arrows to practice. Only by slowly correcting the posture would one be able to increase the strength of the bow. Grandpa Zong directly gave his bullhorn bow to Li Qingshan with the intention of beating him up. Even if you had great strength and could pull it open, it was nothing if you couldn't shoot properly. However, Li Qingshan's performance was beyond his expectations. It wasn't that Li Qingshan's comprehension was far superior to others. What the ox demon's fist of great strength taught him was the most basic method of channeling qi and exerting force. As long as he grasped the key points, he would be able to master them very quickly. Sweat seeped out from Li Qingshan's forehead. Maintaining the posture of drawing the bow was indeed more exhausting than lifting the stone dumbbell. His bones and muscles were aching all over his body. This is a good way to train my strength. Although it is very tiring to train my fists are always in the air. In the future, I will need to buy a strong bow to train my strength. It will definitely be very beneficial. Alright, aim at the target and shoot an arrow for me to see. Grandpa Zong instructed. Li Qingshan put down his bow and rested for a while. Then he picked up an arrow and drew the bow again, aiming at a target 50 paces away. Calm down, don't be in a rush to shoot, look at the target. Grandpa Zong instructed from the side. Li Qingshan's eyes stared straight at the bull's eye. Suddenly his eyes lit up, but because it was daytime, no one noticed. Under his full attention, the target seemed to have grown bigger, no longer so unreachable. Legend has it that in ancient times, when archers practiced their archery, they would tie lice to a string and watch it day and night. They would see the lice slowly grow bigger. At first, it was as big as a car wheel, then as big as a mountain. It would fill their eyes, and when the arrow was shot, it would pierce through the lice's body. Li Qingshan had this feeling at this moment. He knew that this was most likely the effect of oxen's tears. It allowed one to see fast as slow, see far as near, and see through spirits. Li Qingshan suddenly had an idea. The arrow left the bow and flew towards the target. The arrow landed deeply on the wooden target, but it did not hit the bull's eye. Instead, it landed on the edge of the target, barely avoiding missing its target. Li Qingshan felt slightly embarrassed. Even though it didn't hit the bull's eye, it's still a hit. The people around him were shocked, speechless. This was the first time he shot an arrow in his life. He shot a strong bow and hit a target that was 50 steps away. Even in this village that relied on archery for a living for generations, they had never heard of someone like this. Just where did this guy come from? Grandpa Zong forced himself to remain calm. Just practice properly in the future. As an old hunter, he knew very well that this was Li Qingshan's first time shooting an arrow. He could not estimate the direction of the arrow's fall and the effects of the mountain wind. But I still feel that this bow is not strong enough. As the saying goes, draw the bow with force. Li Qingshan wanted to pursue a strong bow that could only be drawn with all his strength. Grandpa Zong did not say anything after hearing this. He took the bow from Li Qingshan's hands and shot at the target in the distance. His cloudy eyes suddenly became as sharp as an eagle's. He waved his right hand several times. Out of everyone present, only Li Qingshan could see it clearly. He fished out 3 arrows one after another. The 3 arrows formed a line and landed on the bullseye. However, there was only one sound. There was a moment of silence before a series of cheers erupted. Rapid arrow. How could Li Qingshan not know the name of this archery skill? He had read about it in a book in his previous life, but he had treated it as an interesting thing. However, after seeing it with his own eyes, he knew that this was a true killing technique. He estimated that unless he fought in close combat, it would be difficult for him to escape this kind of archery skill. If Grandpa Zong were to ambush him, he would definitely die. Grandpa Zong looked at Li Qingshan without saying anything. Li Qingshan already understood what he meant. If he could not use this kind of archery skill, how could he talk about draw the bow with force? It was not that Grandpa Zong could not draw a heavier bow, he had just chosen the most suitable one. He walked up and bowed respectfully, saying with sincerity, Grandpa Zong, please teach me archery. In the future, you will also be a part of my drawn reins village. There is no need for you to say anything. I will naturally teach you with all my heart. As for how much you can learn, that will depend on your own abilities. However, I believe that in the future, your archery skills will definitely be above mine. Grandpa Zong was happy and his expression became pleasant. He did not like Li Qingshan at first, but when Li Qingshan displayed his talent and ability, shocking him and making him lower his stance, his mood took a turn. Not only did he immediately acknowledge Li Qingshan's identity, he even began to praise him greatly. This evaluation shocked everyone. Grandpa Zhang's archery skills were the best in the village, this was publicly acknowledged. Even the archery skills of the headhunter, Huang Binggu, were personally taught by him. For him to give someone such an evaluation, the entire village would probably be shocked. The group of youngsters who had originally been hostile towards Li Qingshan also surrounded him, talking all at once, faintly revealing their desire to get close to him. This was not because they were fawning over those in power, but because at their age they had always respected the strong the most. Perhaps there were still some who were jealous and repelled him, but no one dared to look down on him or provoke him. The atmosphere in the area actually became harmonious. Li Qingshan understood more and more that if he wanted others to acknowledge him, he did not need to rely on flowery words, but rather, he needed to display sufficient ability. If he did not have this ability and wanted to rely on social skills to achieve this effect, not only would he need a very long time, he would also need to bend his back and bend his eyebrows, twisting his heart. Practicing until evening, Li Qingshan was already able to hit the bull's eye with every arrow. However, shooting an arrow like this required preparation. He was far from being able to shoot arrows as he pleased like Grandpa Zong, much less shoot arrows in rapid succession. However, in the eyes of others, this was already terrible enough. For the next few days, Li Qingshan immersed himself in archery, improving day by day. Although he did not stop practicing Ox Demon's fist of great strength, the speed of his improvement was extremely slow. Finally, after enduring for a few days, Li Qingshan returned home and carefully opened the jar of wine. The thick smell of medicine and wine filled his nose. He immediately picked up the jar and took a big gulp. Chapter 26. A thick wave of heat began to boil in his stomach. He immediately got up and began to practice in the courtyard. Only when the heat in his stomach completely disappeared did he let out a long breath and stop. Usually, he would feel tired after practicing for so long, but he was still full of energy today. As expected, the medicinal wine made from ginseng was much more effective than eating meat. Furthermore, the Xianxia in his body seemed to have grown a little. Although it was very small, it was a real improvement. If the medicinal wine made from ordinary ginseng is like this, I wonder what the effects of the spiritual ginseng will be like? He had thought of this before, but when he thought of the difficulty and the consequences of obtaining the spiritual ginseng, he could only give up. In just a few days, a few hunters had been carried down the mountain. Some were dead, while others were injured. It was clear that the ginseng foragers were not easy to deal with. Although Li Qingshan had agreed to join Drawn Rain's village, it was only a temporary measure. He did not really want to participate in the conflict between the two villages. In the blink of an eye, it was the 15th day of the 8th month, mid-autumn. In the forest, Huang Binggu looked at the tired faces around him. These days, he had led the hunters through the mountains and had to be on guard at all times. Even though he had the upper hand and almost defeated the ginseng foragers, it was difficult to ensure his own safety. However, it would be difficult to ensure that one's body would be unharmed, and it would not be easy either. The spirit ginseng only existed in legends, and no one had seen it with their own eyes. There was no point in making a meaningless sacrifice. Huang Binggu let out a long sigh and gave the order to return to the village. Little Black said anxiously, "Hunting chief, you can't give up your body." Huang Binggu said, "The village is more important." Not only did they have to reunite with their families during mid-autumn, it was almost winter. The village also had to prepare for the winter. In a corner of Drawn Rain's village, in Grandpa Zhang's courtyard, Huang Binggu asked with a smile, "Grandpa Zhang, how is that kid?" "He is a natural godly archer. In the future, his archery skills will definitely be above yours and mine, but what? His heart is not in Drawn Rain's village. Even if we let him join, it will be useless. We are the hunting dogs that guard the mountain, but he is a wolf, and a lone wolf at that. He will definitely travel far away." "A lone wolf?" "That's because he hasn't seen the saying, 'A lone wolf is easily destroyed, but a pack of wolves is no match for it.' I'll go see him. I don't believe that he won't be tempted by the position of Drawn Rain's village's headhunter." "You really want him to be a headhunter?" "That still depends on his methods." Huang Binggu smiled. "Qingshan, have you enjoyed your stay during this period of time?" Huang Binggu straightforwardly greeted Qingshan the moment he stepped into the courtyard. "Thank you for your concern, headhunter. I'm living very well." Ever since the news of Li Qingshan killing the 7 ginseng foragers spread throughout the village, everyone became friendly to him. However, this also meant that he had formed a mortal enemy with the Ginseng King village. Those ginseng foragers were not kind people, so he could only rely on the Drawn Rain's village to survive. But could he really only accept this arrangement? Li Qingshan said, "Hunting chief, I would like to spar with you again." Huang Binggu's surprised gaze met Li Qingshan's eyes, which were filled with confidence. Huang Binggu said, "All right, then let me see the results of your recent days." Li Qingshan did not wait for Huang Binggu to get into a fighting stance and suddenly dashed forward. Without any fancy moves, he fiercely punched Huang Binggu's chest, and the faint sound of the air being torn could be heard. "Good lad." Huang Binggu used his arm to block, and with a "pa" sound he staggered back 3 steps before stopping. Shaking his aching arm, he had a look of astonishment on his face. What great strength! Although he had not clashed with Li Qingshan head-on the last time they fought, he reckoned that his strength at that time should not have been this great. Li Qingshan said, "Now watch this move." He immediately dashed over and continued to attack. His fists continuously struck his opponent's chest, and his attacks were like a violent storm. He displayed the power of his fists to the extreme, and his aura was extremely fierce. Huang Binggu had been careless for a moment and lost the initiative, falling into a disadvantageous position. However, it also aroused the heroic spirit in his chest. "I don't believe that you can really beat me in strength." He circulated his inner force, which flowed along his meridians to his arms. With the surge of inner force, his arms seemed to thicken as he met Li Qingshan's fists head-on. As a martial artist, all their martial arts were based on this inner force. By doing this, he was already using his true strength. Peng 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 peng. The two's arms crossed, clashing head-on. Every time they clashed, there would be a loud sound of flesh and bone colliding, as if wild beasts were tearing at each other. It was extremely rough and barbaric. Huang Binggu was, after all, very experienced. Seeing the right opportunity, he smashed his fist towards Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan actually did not block or dodge, and instead punched towards Huang Binggu's face. Huang Binggu thought to himself, "I've bitterly cultivated my inner force for many years. The strength of my fist can even kill a calf. Even if you practice an external hard body technique, you will still be injured." As for Li Qingshan's fist, he was even more disdainful of it. His fist had struck Li Qingshan first, and Li Qingshan's figure would definitely freeze for a moment. With a "peng," his fist struck Li Qingshan's chest. As expected, Li Qingshan's figure paused for a moment, but he immediately recovered and was not affected. Huang Binggu was greatly shocked and hastily used a lazy donkey roll. The wind from the fist brushed past his cheek, causing him to feel a dull pain. Li Qingshan chuckled and stood still, no longer giving chase. Huang Binggu stood up. "You're actually fine?" He was the clearest about the power of his fist. Even if Li Qingshan had used external force to block the strength of his fist, he would not have been able to block the true qi contained in his fist. However, it had not been of any use. Li Qingshan rubbed his chest. "It really hurts." Just now, there seemed to be a wave of qi that had passed through his skin and entered his body. However, it was immediately dispelled by the true qi in his body and did not cause any damage at all. After that, he immediately regained his breath and almost hit Huang Binggu. Using Huang Binggu's words to explain it, this was the difference in quality between acquired inner force and innate true qi. Huang Binggu did not know whether to laugh or cry. His fist that was filled with confidence only received such an evaluation. However, all martial artists had a competitive heart. He shouted, "Then eat a few more of my punches." The two of them fought again. This time, Huang Binggu did not hold back and used all of his strength. His figure became much faster, and Li Qingshan could not block it. His fists rained down on Li Qingshan's body. From an outsider's point of view, Huang Binggu was suppressing Li Qingshan and had the upper hand. However, the two of them had different feelings. Li Qingshan only felt that Huang Binggu's movements seemed to have slowed down and become less unpredictable. Even when his fists landed on Huang Binggu's body, it only caused him a slight pain. Thus, he simply ignored him and focused on attacking. He was like a reef in a storm, not moving at all. Meanwhile, the more Huang Binggu fought, the more shocked he became. Li Qingshan's speed, reaction, and strength were all much stronger than the last time they fought. It was as if he had become a completely different person. He could no longer easily attack Li Qingshan's vital points, but it was completely useless to attack other areas. Furthermore, during the battle, Li Qingshan's attacks became more and more methodical. From time to time, he would use one or two extremely exquisite fist techniques, causing Huang Binggu to fall into a dangerous situation. Huang Binggu had to use his many years of experience to resolve the situation. The ferocity of Li Qingshan's fists told him that he would be finished as long as he was hit by one of his fists. The distance between the two of them was rapidly shrinking. As a result, such a strange scene appeared. One of them was punched repeatedly, but his aura was getting stronger and stronger. Meanwhile, the other was not injured at all, but his aura was getting weaker and weaker. Huang Binggu's forehead began to sweat, and he felt tired. However, Li Qingshan's expression did not change, and his heart did not beat. Oxen were originally animals with great endurance. The higher one cultivated, the more obvious the gap between magical powers and martial arts became. Chapter 27. Li Qingshan let out a long sigh. How satisfying! Huang Binggu's arms were trembling. That was the result of colliding with Li Qingshan's hand. He sized up Li Qingshan from afar with a strange expression. "Just how did you train?" This kind of improvement speed was simply monstrous. He had originally thought highly of Li Qingshan's will and martial arts, thinking that he had discovered a piece of unpolished jade in a pile of rubble. He wanted to polish it to see if he had the qualifications to take over the position of hunting head, but in the end, he realized that he had still underestimated Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan thought for a moment. Recently, I've been drinking medicinal wine brewed with ginseng. It's a prescription left behind by my master. Huang Binggu hesitated for a moment. Can I take a look? Originally, the rules of the pugilistic world forbade one from casually inquiring about such things, but he really wanted to know what was going on. Li Qingshan said without hesitation, "No problem." Huang Binggu asked about the prescription, and Li Qingshan told him the truth. Huang Binggu nodded. This prescription is indeed exquisite, but isn't the medicinal strength a little too strong? Too much ginseng has been used, so you can't drink too much. Just a small cup every day is enough. Other than that, it was not much different from ordinary medicinal wine. He even specially went to Li Qingshan's room and tasted it. The conclusion he came to was the same. He did not believe that just drinking medicinal wine brewed with ginseng would allow one's martial arts to improve so quickly. Then wouldn't everyone in the Ginseng King village be peerless experts? But it would be too inappropriate to continue asking, so he could only suppress his doubts. He did not think about the martial arts that Li Qingshan practiced. After all, there were no extraordinary external martial arts techniques. Of course, Li Qingshan could not tell him that he drank this medicinal wine by the bowl. He drank at least a few big bowls every day, and he had already drunk most of it during this period of time. That's right, what grade is my martial arts now? Barely qualified as a third rate. Huang Binggu still remembered his evaluation of Li Qingshan a few days ago. It would not be a problem for him to become a third-grade expert. In the blink of an eye, it had become true. It was like a dream. Only third rate? Li Qingshan asked greedily. Huang Binggu's eyes widened. Anyone who could train their martial arts to the third rate could already be considered an expert, yet this fellow was still not satisfied. Didn't that mean that his martial arts were also only third rate? He was also someone who had been the headhunter of the Drawn Rains village for many years. He was not willing to be outdone by this brat. However, my expertise is not in martial arts, but in archery. In terms of martial arts, the people of the Ginseng King village are also slightly stronger than us. However, only we dare to call ourselves the Drawn Rains village. With our powerful bows and crossbows, even a first-rate expert would not dare to take them lightly. Moreover, the other reason was him. His illness was close to incurable, but even though he was called Sickly Tiger, the word illness was the most taboo for him. No matter what, he would not use this as a reason. Yes, I've been practicing rapid arrow recently and can already shoot 3 arrows in a row. Unfortunately, my accuracy is still a bit lacking. Please give me some pointers, hunting chief. Li Qingshan had seen Huang Binggu's archery with his own eyes, so he naturally did not dare to underestimate him. Being able to shoot 3 arrows in a row? You've only been practicing archery for a month. Huang Binggu felt that he had suffered too many blows today. He waved his hand. Tomorrow, go ask Grandpa Zong for pointers. I also want to go home for a reunion dinner. He understood in his heart that this brat might really have the aptitude to roam the martial world. There was no need to mention the matter of being a headhunter. If he had this kind of speed of improvement back then, he would definitely not have returned to the Drawn Rains village. That's right, it's the Mid-Autumn Festival again. Li Qingshan looked up at the sky. The full moon had just risen, but he had no relatives to reunite with. However, he still had a demon and a ghost by his side, so he could have a reunion dinner. Thus, he went to make preparations. He prepared grass for oxen, wine and meat for himself, and incense, candles, and paper money for little N. Everything was in order, but there was no sign of little N. Brother Nyo, where did little N go? I don't know. Li Qingshan mumbled. That brat has been playing wild lately. He doesn't bother me anymore. How strange. Let's just wait for him. The full moon gradually rose, and there was only silence on Bai Lao Peak. The bright moon shone down its clear radiance from the horizon. A few people wearing bamboo hats were lying in the lush grass, looking up at the highest cliff of Bai Lao Peak, as if they were waiting for something. We've spent so much effort, so many people have died, and we've become sworn enemies with the people of Drawn Rains village, but we haven't even seen a hair of the spiritual ginseng. Right now, even the people of Drawn Rain's village have retreated down the mountain to reunite with their families, but we still have to stand guard. What is the Manor Lord thinking about? What do you know? The spiritual ginseng is a spiritual object. After being alarmed, it will naturally hide and not appear. However, tonight is the night of the full moon, so the spiritual ginseng will definitely appear and absorb the moonlight. The Manor Lord has already predicted this. As long as we obtain the spiritual ginseng, the Manor Lord's power will increase greatly. Why would we be afraid of Drawn Rain's village? When the time comes, we'll flatten Drawn Rain's village, rob them of all their food and wealth, and play with all their women. Only then will we be able to take our revenge. Quiet, don't ruin the Manor Lord's plans, someone at the side chided in a low voice. The voices of the people immediately quieted down, leaving only the low chirping of the dying autumn insects. The full moon rose high in the sky. A small person about a foot tall suddenly burrowed out of the ground, hesitantly walking towards the high cliff where the moonlight was the brightest. Upon closer inspection, it was not a small person, but a ginseng. However, it vaguely had the shape of a person. Under the night sky, it looked like a small person. When it walked, it was light as if it was floating. The ginseng foragers lying in ambush in the underbrush immediately held their breaths, not daring to make a sound. They had never seen such a miraculous spiritual herb in their entire lives. The spiritual ginseng looked left and right, as if confirming that there was no one around, then floated to the highest point of the cliff and settled down. Strands of moonlight twined around its body. With a command, the ginseng foragers attacked together. A net descended from the sky, pouncing towards the spiritual ginseng. The spiritual ginseng was immersed in the moonlight, and before it could react, it was caught in the net and lifted off the ground. The net was made of cow tendons, and no matter how it struggled, it could not break free. The 4 ginseng foragers beamed with joy and moved closer to take a closer look. There are many cliffs on this Bailao peak, and there are people lying in ambush everywhere. This spiritual ginseng just had to fall into our hands. The heavens are really helping us. When we get back, we'll definitely be able to get some soup to drink. Who knows, we might even be able to become an expert. Who knows, if we eat the whole ginseng, we might even become immortals. The few of them laughed heartily, and the smile of one of the ginseng foragers suddenly froze. A snow-white blade had pierced through his throat, and he struggled to turn his head. The tip of the blade had already retracted, and he immediately fell to the ground. When he fell, he could only vaguely see a black shadow. The other ginseng foragers reacted, and with angry roars, they pulled out their swords and slashed at the black shadow. The blade of the sword swept past their necks like a spiritual snake, and a few drops of blood splattered. In an instant, 4 ginseng foragers had died a violent death, and they did not even have the chance to retaliate. It was evident that the person who had come was highly skilled. I didn't expect the rumors to be true. You bunch of country bumpkins are not worthy of enjoying such a spiritual item. A young man dressed in luxurious clothing elegantly sheathed his long sword. At the same time, he stretched out his hand to grab the spiritual ginseng that had fallen to the ground. He could not help but feel excited. As long as he could get his hands on the spiritual ginseng, his skills would definitely increase greatly. Chapter 28. The man was startled when he saw the spiritual ginseng bobbing up and down in the air. He became anxious and used his qinggong to grab the spiritual ginseng, but it flew straight down the cliff. He could only watch it disappear into the darkness, feeling so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. No, I must get this spiritual ginseng. When I go back, I will ask Father to send more people to search the mountain. The man thought that it was the spirit ginseng's own miraculous ability, but if he had opened his spirit eyes, he would have seen the spirit ginseng being tightly grasped by a pair of pale little hands. He was the mantis stalking the cicada, but he did not guard against the oriole behind. A ghost that he could not see had been hiding in the darkness. Under the cliff, Little and used all his strength to grab the spiritual ginseng and floated towards Drawn Rain's village with the night wind. He was so happy that he was about to explode. Fortunately, he had been nourishing his spiritual body in the locust wood tablet, so he had the strength to grab such a heavy thing. In the courtyard, Li Qingshan yawned. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he saw Little and float over from afar. "Little brat, where did you run off to?" Little and bit his lips and suppressed the joy in his heart as he held the spiritual ginseng in front of him. What is this? Ginseng? Li Qingshan took the spiritual ginseng and sniffed it lightly. A strange fragrance entered his nose and he immediately felt his spirit rise. The true qi in his body seemed to be much more active. Li Qingshan suddenly thought of something. This is spiritual ginseng. He couldn't believe that the spiritual herb that caused the two villages to fight and kill each other and cost dozens of lives was now in his hands. Oxen chewed on the grass lazily. Why else do you think this little brat runs out every night? Li Qingshan saw that Little N's face was full of exhaustion, but he was extremely happy. He even used his little finger to point at his mouth as if he wanted him to eat it. These days, Little N went out every dusk and only returned near dawn. He didn't talk much with him. He thought that Little N yearned for freedom and wanted to let him go. Only now did he know that it was all for him. You brat! Li Qingshan felt a lump in his throat. Why didn't you say so earlier? Little N smiled shyly and pointed at his mouth. Even if Li Qingshan had a heart of stone, he couldn't help but be moved by those pure and innocent eyes. He asked Oxen, "This spiritual ginseng, Little N can also use it, right?" Oxen said, "This spirit ginseng is a rare innate item. The spiritual energy contained in it is beneficial even to evil ghosts. However, if you use it, you can easily achieve the strength of an ox. Are you willing to use it?" Li Qingshan said, "What's there to be reluctant about?" The spiritual ginseng was obtained by Little N in the first place. Just let Little N consume it. I'll just slowly cultivate the divine ability. His principle of doing things would not change because of the temptation of the spiritual ginseng. Little N immediately retreated and waved his hand. "All right, I will remember your kindness." Little N just shook his head. In the end, he simply turned into a wisp of green smoke and burrowed into the locust wood tablet. "Hey, come out quickly. If you don't want it, I'll throw it away." Oxen suddenly shouted, "Since he has the heart, why are you so stubborn and like a little girl? Can't you find something hundreds or thousands of times better than this spiritual ginseng for him in the future?" Li Qingshan shuddered inside. He nodded. "Brother Ox is right. I've been too stubborn. Alright, come on out. I'll be ingesting the spiritual ginseng." Xiao immediately flew out. "But this thing should belong to you. I can't take it alone. If you refuse again, I'll be angry." Little N just now agreed. Li Qingshan shook the spiritual ginseng in his hand and said, "Brother Nyo, how do I use this thing?" Little N's body of evil ghost could not eat anything. Oxen said, "Go find a needle and take out a drop of ginseng liquid." Li Qingshan found a steel needle and pierced it into the spiritual ginseng. The spiritual ginseng trembled in his hand, but he was not soft-hearted to a plant. A drop of ginseng liquid seeped into the spiritual ginseng and hung on the tip of the needle. Oxen said, "Well, drip it into his beer." "Beer?" Little N look up. Xiao hurriedly raised his head. The ginseng liquid dripped down from the tip of the needle and landed in between Xiao's eyebrows. His body trembled like water ripples. The ginseng liquid in his body suddenly emitted a resplendent light. Little N closed his eyes tightly. The expression on his face alternated between pain and joy until the light disappeared. Just now, he calmed down and slowly opened his eyes. There was something else in his eyes. 2 lines of tears fell down. "What's wrong?" Oxen said, "You must have remembered something." "Is that so?" Little N, do you remember who you are and where your home is?" Li Qingshan knelt down and looked into his eyes. Little N hesitated for a long time and pointed in a direction. Li Qingshan asked, "Is your home in the south? Which city is it? How far is it from here?" But these questions Little N could not answer. He could only shake his head blankly. Li Qingshan suddenly pulled out his hunting knife and started carving on the locust wood plate. Sawdust flew everywhere. The word south appeared on the originally blank side of the plate. He raised it in front of little Anne. Under the moonlight, the young man knelt on one knee and promised the child seriously, "No matter how many mountains and rivers there are, sooner or later, I will send you home." The child looked at his figure in a daze. He would never forget it. Just like the spot between his eyebrows where the ginseng liquid dripped, there was a red mole. Li Qingshan hung the wooden plate back on his waist and asked Little Anne if he felt any changes. He did not know if the spiritual ginseng was useful. Little Anne leaped into the air and flew around the courtyard like a whirlwind. He carried the hunting knife in Li Qingshan's hand and danced around the courtyard. If it was a normal person, they would only see a knife dancing on its own as if it had a spirit. Not only did Little Anne's speed become faster, but he could also control heavier objects and become more powerful. If it was a sneak attack, even a martial arts master would not be able to escape death. "Brother Nyo, do I have to use it like this?" That would be too wasteful. The best way to use this ginseng is to combine it with other spiritual herbs and refine it into a pill. But you don't have this condition. You can handle this spiritual ginseng like other ginseng and soak it in wine. This way, the spiritual ginseng will not wither and the spiritual energy on it will seep into the wine, turning it into spiritual wine. You can also slowly absorb the medicinal energy inside. Alright, don't mix it with other medicinal herbs. This is a good idea. Li Qingshan knew that he could not digest the spiritual ginseng in one go. Otherwise, it would not be a great improvement in his skills, but an explosion. "It's just that I don't feel at ease if I don't carry this treasure with me." Before he finished speaking, a wine gourd flew towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan grabbed it and said, "Thank you, Brother Nyo." He put the spiritual ginseng into the gourd and filled it with strong wine before hanging it on his waist. He crossed his arms and his body was strong. The huge wine gourd hung on his body. Although he was still young, he was full of a bold and unruly aura. "Little Anne, don't you think I'm becoming more and more like a person of the pugilistic world?" Little Anne also laughed, but his expression changed to one of worry. However, he could not speak, so he was a little anxious. Suddenly, he had an idea and squatted on the ground. Chapter 29. Li Qingshan hurriedly asked, "You can read. Did you remember it just now?" Little Anne nodded and showed Li Qingshan the words he had written. Only now did Li Qingshan realize that someone else had interfered and attempted to steal the spirit ginseng. Their martial arts were very powerful. Since they had seen this item, they would definitely not give up and would definitely think of a way to find it. Looks like I still need to be more careful and not leak any information. However, when my magical powers advance further and I cultivate the strength of an ox, I won't be afraid of anyone. The longer the spirit ginseng was brewed, the better it would be. If it was too thick, Li Qingshan would not be able to digest it. Thus, after waiting for 3 to 5 days, Li Qingshan drank his first mouthful of spirit wine. A strange fragrance spread in his mouth. The taste was not strong, but rather faint. Extremely pure spiritual energy spread throughout his body. He did not dare to be negligent. He circulated his magical powers and digested this spiritual energy. To his surprise, he discovered that the effects of this mouthful of spirit wine were much better than drinking a jar of wine brewed from ordinary ginseng. The true qi in his body had doubled. Although ordinary ginseng could replenish vitality, it was still an acquired item and could not be of much help to true qi. On the other hand, Ox Demon's Fist of Great Strength focused more on body cultivation than qi cultivation, so the growth of his true qi was not fast. This spirit ginseng was a true Khanate item. It was the best at replenishing spiritual energy, which was why it had such an effect. If this continued, it would not be long before he could achieve the effect of releasing his true qi. At that time, he could also call himself a Khanate expert. "Brother Ox, I once promised to drink all the finest wine in the world. Now, I've more or less fulfilled my promise." After drinking this spirit wine, drinking ordinary wine would be tasteless. Oxen only sneered in response. At this time, there was a commotion outside and the sound of many dogs barking. Huang Binggu brought the hunters of the village to Li Qingshan's door and invited him to participate in the autumn hunt. Autumn was the best season for hunting. Not only did people have to prepare food for the winter, but the animals also had to do the same. All of them had to be plump and strong. It was an important gathering for Drawn Rain's village. Many big families would organize large-scale hunting activities at this time of the year, not to catch prey, but to train their descendants and cater to the killing intent of autumn. Huang Binggu said, "You've only learned archery and have yet to learn the true way of hunting. This time, when we enter the mountains, you'll follow me." Ever since the last time he fought with Li Qingshan, he no longer treated Li Qingshan as an ordinary youngster. Li Qingshan thought about it and still refused. "Thank you for your kind offer, but I want to hunt alone." Before Huang Binggu could say anything, the other hunters started discussing. "What, alone? Not only has he never hunted before, he doesn't even have a decent hunting dog. Are you really not afraid of the beasts in the mountains?" Although they admired Li Qingshan's skill in killing the 7 ginseng foragers, they could not underestimate him in his area of expertise. Huang Binggu advised, "Hunting doesn't depend on good archery and skill." He suddenly remembered Grandpa Zhang's evaluation, a lone wolf. Li Qingshan still shook his head. He only wanted to learn archery so that he could use it to kill enemies and defend himself. As for hunting, there was no need for it. If he wants to be alone, then he'll be alone. Let's see what he can catch in the end. I don't think he'll even be able to catch a rabbit. Li Qingshan smiled but did not comment. Suddenly, someone said in a strange tone, "He's already been freeloading in the village for so long, yet he still refuses to follow the arrangements. Does he really want to continue freeloading?" These days, all of Li Qingshan's food in the village had been delivered by Huang Binggu's people, so he must have used the village's resources. His appetite was also very small, so it was only natural that he would attract some dissatisfaction. Huang Binggu immediately berated that person. "Qingshan is also a member of our village. How can you be so calculative about some food?" Li Qingshan's expression turned serious as he cupped his fists and said, "Hunting chief, you don't have to feel bad. I, Li Qingshan, am someone who clearly distinguishes between kindness and hatred. I will never take advantage of others. I will definitely pay back double for what I've consumed in the village these days." "Qingshan, there's no need for that." Huang Binggu was furious at the person who said this. "I wholeheartedly wanted to rope him into the village, yet you people are pushing him away for a few caddies of meat." Li Qingshan did not want to blend in with any place. There was no need, nor was he in the mood. "I heard that the village has a competition every year during the autumn hunt to see who can hunt the most prey. The winner gets a prize, so I'll participate this year as well." Huang Binggu could not dissuade him, so Li Qingshan made some preparations. Under everyone's mocking gazes, he took a normal hunting bow and entered the mountains. The hunters went to the North Mountain, but Li Qingshan did not want to mix with them. To the west was the 10,000 Great Mountains. He understood the mysteries of this world, so he was even more unwilling to take risks. To the south was Bailao Peak, a troublesome place. Therefore, he could only head east. On Bailao Peak, a group of people wearing the same clothes and carrying long swords gathered together. The person in the lead was the young man who had almost obtained the spiritual ginseng after killing the ginseng forager. "Search. Even if we have to turn Bailao Peak upside down, we must find the spiritual ginseng." "Yes, young master," everyone answered in unison. Using their exquisite qinggong, they flew to various parts of Bailao Peak. Li Qingshan went deep into the mountain forest. He did not know how to distinguish the tracks of birds and beasts, nor did he know how to hide his tracks. He did not know how to set up traps, nor did he have the cooperation of other hunters. He did not even have a hunting dog. If such a person said he wanted to hunt, any hunter would laugh. However, he was not in a hurry. He sat on a wooden stake in the mountain and meditated until dusk. Just now, he opened his eyes and said with a smile, "Little Anne." A gust of cold wind swept through the forest. After a while it blew back. Li Qingshan stood up and walked through the forest. Not long after, he found a deer that had fallen to the ground. There was not a single wound on its body. After little An's strength increased, his own yin qi also became heavier. He discovered that the deer only needed to pounce on him before it immediately fell unconscious and died on the ground. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "I have little An with me. Naturally, I don't need to learn any hunting skills. It's a waste of time. They actually look down on me. Let's catch a few more prey and show them." Ever since the Mid-Autumn Festival, Li Qingshan was no longer as indulgent towards little An. Instead, he had more control over him. Now, he did not hold back when he used him. Naturally, he did not need to be so courteous towards people he was close to. Little An nodded excitedly and rushed into the forest like the wind. Although the beasts in the forest were vigilant, they could not be wary of this invisible little demon. They all fell to the ground, waiting for Li Qingshan to pick them up. Li Qingshan was idle and bored, so he began to practice his archery. He shot the startled birds in the forest. Shooting moving things was indeed much more difficult. Out of every 3 arrows, 2 would miss. However, as he gradually got used to it, the number of missed shots decreased. At dawn, in the Drawn Rains village, a few hunters brought the hunters down the mountain. The large group of people and horses were still in the mountains to hunt together. In an open space in the middle of the village, the highly respected Grandpa Zong was in charge of counting the prey. A smile appeared on his stern face. "The harvest is not bad. It's a good sign." Then, the women and children who stayed behind in the village handled the prey, tanned the leather, and marinated the meat. That Li Qingshan hasn't returned yet? There were already people who could not wait to see Li Qingshan make a fool of himself. He went into the mountains to hunt alone. How could he return so quickly? Before the voice had died away, someone shouted, "Li Qingshan is back." What is that? The few people looked in the direction of the voice. The first thing they saw was not a person, but a bunch of furry monsters, like the legendary savages. Li Qingshan bent over, carrying deer, elk, and so on. There were quite a few large prey that weighed several hundred kilograms. His waist was covered in pheasants and hares. Along the way down the mountain, even he was covered in sweat. He said with difficulty, "Oi, Shaoan, isn't this a little too much? It's heavy." Chapter 30. With a boom, Li Qingshan placed all of the prey before Grandpa Zong. "This should be enough to make up for my rations in the village during this period of time." There was a series of gulps in the surroundings. In particular, the hunters who had just left the mountain were completely dumbfounded. Their entire group had worked together and prepared meticulously, yet the prey they had hunted was actually less than Li Qingshan alone. Grandpa Zong discovered that many of the prey did not have any wounds at all. "How did you hunt?" This was the question that everyone present wanted to ask. Li Qingshan thought about it and replied, "I caught them with my hands." Everyone collapsed in laughter, but they could not even bring themselves to question him. Li Qingshan glanced at the prey the hunters had brought down the mountain. "You've hunted so much already. You're almost catching up to me." "No, I need to work harder as well, or I won't be able to win." Grandpa Zong was unable to explain to him that the prey had to be split among the hunters. On average, each hunter would not even get a single prey. On the first day of hunting, Li Qingshan had basically already won. Li Qingshan ate a mouthful of food before going back up the mountain. The hunters returned to the northern mountain in a daze and told him about what had happened in the village. "How's that possible? You must have been drinking in the village." "It's true. There really was this much prey," they explained in a hurry. "That kid." Huang Binggu exhaled deeply and called out, "Let's all work harder. Don't fall behind him. If all of us together aren't as good as him alone, then we can all go slit our throats." The hunters answered loudly, and their morale skyrocketed. Huang Binggu silently suppressed his coughing fit. He looked at his palm and saw a patch of dark red blood. On the mountain path, a group of people traveled slowly. In the center was a small sedan chair, carried by 4 porters and surrounded by over a dozen servants. A chubby hand lifted the curtain of the sedan chair, revealing a chubby face. He asked, "Advisor, how far are we from Qingyang City?" It was clearly late autumn, but he was still covered in sweat as he sat in the sedan chair. A butler said, "Sir, it's still far away. It'll be good enough if we can get there tonight." The fat official put down the curtain of the sedan chair and muttered, "I have great knowledge of managing the affairs of the world, but you actually want me to go to such a remote place to be a county magistrate." The magistrate is really confused. "Milord, you shouldn't speak carelessly. It wouldn't be good if the prefectural magistrate heard about it." The fat lord snorted twice and said no more. At this moment, the mountain wind suddenly blew, startling countless forest birds. Whoa! A roar came from the dense forest beside the mountain path. The sedan chair fell to the ground with a thud, and the fat official's eyes and mouth became crooked. What's going on? Is someone trying to murder me? Tiger! The advisor fell to the ground and pointed forward with a trembling finger. A brightly colored ferocious tiger leaped down from the slope and landed on the mountain path. It stared at the palanquin covetously. The word, "King," on its forehead looked very majestic. "Who, tiger? What? It's a tiger. Quick, someone come and take down this beast for me." The advisor was about to cry. They've all run away. The fat official lifted the curtain of the sedan chair to take a look. As expected, all the bearers, servants, and servants in the surroundings had all run away. When they heard the tiger's roar, they reacted. The working people at the bottom were still very vigilant. The ancients said, "The mention of a tiger makes one pale." In this era, there wasn't a single commoner who wasn't afraid of tigers. Ferocious tigers eating humans was also a very common thing. "Advisor, you're really loyal. You didn't let down my great kindness." The fat official was moved. The advisor instinctively said, "Thank you for your praise, sir. Even if this lowly one's body is torn to pieces, it's hard for me to repay you." He cursed in his heart, "F***, I can't walk. Hold on, I'll go get reinforcements." The fat official nimbly crawled out of the sedan chair and wanted to escape. The advisor hugged the fat official's leg. "Sir, don't leave this lowly one behind." Seeing this lump of fat, the ferocious tiger's eyes seemed to light up. Just as it was about to pounce, its ears suddenly twitched, and it shrank its body to face the forest. The vegetation in the forest swayed and rustled. It was getting closer and closer, and its momentum was even greater than the ferocious tiger's appearance just now. What is this?" The advisor mumbled. A figure leaped out of the forest. It was a youth. His young face couldn't be considered handsome, but it was full of vigor. He landed on the mountain path nimbly. His face was that of a ferocious tiger, and he bared his teeth with a smile. What a rare and good prey. The ferocious tiger seemed to know that the person coming was not easy to deal with. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws to threaten him, but it was useless. Its body shook, and it pounced forward with a roar. Xianxia's foot landed firmly on the ground, and his hands grabbed the tiger's two claws. The tiger's mouth, which was full of fangs, was right in front of him, and a fishy smell hit his face. He shouted in a deep voice, and his vital energy surged. He exerted force in his arms and flipped the ferocious tiger, which weighed several hundred kilograms, onto the ground. He pounced on the tiger's back. He had never dealt with a tiger before. He had only seen Wu Song fight a tiger in water margin, so he copied him. He grabbed the tiger's back and punched it randomly. The ferocious tiger roared out in pain and bent its body violently. Xianxia was sent flying. He thought, reality really is different from what's written in books. The true qi in his body sank, and he landed firmly on the ground. He was about to deal with it carefully. However, the ferocious tiger glanced at him and let out a growl before turning around and fleeing. The fat official and the advisor were both stunned by what had happened just now. Only now did they return to their senses, and they were overjoyed. "Young hero, warrior, I am the district magistrate of Qingyang. If you chase away this tiger, I will reward you handsomely." However, Xianxia did not even look at them. He yelled out, "Where do you think you're going?" He strode over and grabbed the tiger's tail that was like a steel whip. However, the tail was slippery, so it was difficult to grab. How could Li Qingshan let go of such a great prey before him? He chased after the tiger. The fat official and the advisor only returned to their senses after quite a while. They looked at one another. The autumn hunt ended, and the Drawn Rains village was filled with a joyous atmosphere. Li Qingshan returned to the village as well. He was covered in many wounds, such that he seemed to be in a rather sorry shape. However, when everyone saw him, they all revealed expressions of respect. It was not because of his wounds, but because of the prey on his shoulder. He was carrying an adult tiger on his shoulder. He had only chased after the tiger for a day and a night in the forest. He had only managed to make it through the endurance granted to him by the ox demon's fist of great strength. If it were not for Little and helping to track him at night, he would have almost lost him several times. However, even Little and was unable to approach the king of the mountains. Ferocious tigers possessed an innate dignity that could subdue ghosts. As a matter of fact, tiger demons that had developed into demons could even turn the people they ate into demons. The children in the village ran around Li Qingshan. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Huang Binggu personally went out to receive him before declaring him first. No one in the village dared to defy him. Not only were tigers extremely terrifying wild beasts to regular people, but to hunters as well. Regular hunting bows could not kill tigers at all. Instead, it would incite the tiger's ferocity. Using a hunting knife to fight a tiger in close combat would only lead to death. Li Qingshan had killed the tiger, so he seemed to possess the might of a tiger. I don't have anything valuable on me. I'll use this stone splitter bow as a reward for the autumn hunt. Huang Binggu suddenly removed the large bow from his back. Chapter 31. Hunting Chief, you mustn't do that. The other hunters tried to dissuade him in a hurry. Li Qingshan was surprised as well. Huang Binggu actually wanted to give his personal bow to him. The meaning behind this was not just a bow. He turned him down. Hunting Chief, a gentleman doesn't take what others like. I can't accept this wager, so just treat it as a joke. Huang Binggu stroked the bow gently and said to himself, this stone splitter bow has been with me for many years, so it's quite convenient to use. It's also helped me make a name for myself in the Jianghu. Now that I don't have much time left, I'd like to choose a good master for it. I heard you found Grandpa Zhang's bow too light. This stone splitter bow is an iron bow with a strength of 3 stones. Even regular practitioners of martial arts can't use it. Here, don't dilly-dally. Huang Binggu pushed the stone splitter bow to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan gripped the bow and felt a heaviness in his hand. He recalled Huang Binggu's elegance when he stood on the rock and killed people like he was slaughtering dogs. Yes, this bow was not suited for hunting. It was more suited for fighting on the battlefield. It was a true weapon for killing. He fiddled with the bowstring with his fingers. There were metal threads mixed in, so they were extremely sharp. Regular people had to wear rings to use it, but with the ox demon forges its hide, he did not mind. Huang Binggu seemed to want to entrust his son to him. He did not say it explicitly, but everyone present could tell. However, no one objected. Not only was this because of Huang Binggu's might, but Li Qingshan had also proven his strength before everyone. There was no need to ask whether Li Qingshan had the ability to lead, or whether the villagers were convinced. Obeying the strong was a human instinct, just like a pack of wolves. The Drawn Rains village was a pack of wolves. Huang Binggu wanted Li Qingshan to replace him as the Wolf King. This was a decision he had made after a long period of consideration. The Drawn Rains village had always been disliked by the government, and they had become sworn enemies with the Ginseng King village. They seemed impressive, but they were actually surrounded by danger. There were talented people in the village, but none of them could control the situation. Only Li Qingshan could do this. Li Qingshan held the stone splitter bow and felt like he was dreaming. A few months ago, he was still the most inconspicuous, lowly cowherd in the village. A few months later, he had the opportunity to become the renowned hunting chief of the Drawn Rains village, but he did not accept it. Hunting chief, I'll accept this bow. Thank you for your kindness, but I've actually come to bid you farewell today. With that, there was an uproar. Everyone felt like Li Qingshan did not know how to appreciate his kindness. Even though Huang Binggu understood Li Qingshan's strength and potential, his expression was rather ugly after being rejected in front of so many people. Huang, but I want it for myself. Li Qingshan returned to his room and took out a small bottle of alcohol, passing it to Huang Binggu. This is the medicinal alcohol my master left behind in the past. It might be able to cure your illness. You from Tian-Ti-Ti-Ti-Ti. Li-Tut, Ti-Ti-Ti-Ti. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "There's no harm in trying." This was the spiritual wine brewed from the spiritual ginseng. Although he was not skilled in medicine, he had some understanding of Huang Binggu's illness. He had been born with a weak body, and his many years of practicing martial arts had exhausted his origin, so he had to rely on his inner strength to support himself. This was an incurable disease that even a divine doctor would find difficult to cure. This was a congenital defect that no one could cure. However, the spirit ginseng had an innate qi that could save his life. Huang Binggu drank the spiritual wine in one gulp, then sat down to meditate. After a short while, wisps of white qi emitted from the top of his head, and his originally sallow complexion regained its ruddiness. After a long time, he opened his eyes. "Chief Hunter, what do you think?" The hunters asked one after another. Huang Binggu touched his chest in disbelief. "I feel much better." It was not just much better, it was better than ever. It was as if he had returned to his youth. There was a burst of cheers, and many of the hunters shed tears. Many of the people who had originally been hostile towards Li Qingshan all changed their attitudes, holding his hands and thanking him profusely. Li Qingshan raised the stone splitter bow. "Then it would be impolite of me to refuse this bow." Huang Binggu's expression darkened slightly. "Can we change the wager?" Having escaped from death, he was immediately reluctant to part with this old companion. "Don't even think about it." Li Qingshan refused firmly. "The words of a man of the mountains are like the mountains. How can I repent so easily?" "All right then." Huang Binggu's expression was bitter, which led to a burst of laughter from the people around him. Very rarely did they see their chief hunter act like this. "Qingshan, are you going to come back?" "I'm just going to Crouching Ox Village to take a look. There are still some things I haven't tidied up yet, and I want to find a quiet place to practice my martial arts and see if I can make a breakthrough." Over the past few days of drinking spiritual alcohol, Li Qingshan felt that he had already touched upon the crux of the ox demon's fist of great strength. He planned on cultivating alone and achieving the strength of an ox. By then, he would no longer have to remain trapped in the mountains and forests. He could go out and see the outside world. He remembered that the fatty he saved yesterday seemed to have called himself some Qingyang district magistrate. He wanted to fulfill his promise with Little N. Although he had no idea how far south Little N pointed to was, he still had to take the first step. Another breakthrough? Huang Binggu had sensed long ago that the current Li Qingshan had changed again compared to a few days ago. His entire being had undergone a drastic change. This rate of improvement was basically shocking. Yet in the blink of an eye, he said he wanted to make another breakthrough. He could not help but think of how Li Qingshan had once said he wanted to become an innate master. Back then, he had only thought of it as a passing thought. Now, he suddenly felt that perhaps he really could achieve it. But what about the prey you've hunted? Li Qingshan's harvest over the past few days had almost caught up to the entire village's harvest. "I don't want anything else. I just want the tiger bones from that tiger. Also, I want you to collect some tiger bones for me. I want to make some medicinal alcohol. I'll buy them at market price." The reason why he chased after the tiger relentlessly was not just because he wanted to show off in the village. Instead, it was because Oxen had told him that once he achieved the strength of an ox with the ox demon's fist of great strength, he could begin practicing the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. He needed to use another type of medicinal alcohol. The most important ingredient was like ginseng, precious but not uncommon. It was tiger bones. Hunters and tigers were mortal enemies. A single hunter would be afraid of a vicious tiger, but once a tiger became too aggressive, they would definitely search the mountain on a large scale, setting up many traps. Wild beasts were vicious, but they were still no match for humans. The number of tiger bones accumulated in the Drawn Rains village was probably not small. Huang Bingu said, "Is this the prescription your master left behind? Are you saying that just because you're generous, the men of my Drawn Rains village are petty? I can help you make the medicinal alcohol, but can you let us use those 2 prescriptions as well?" Huang Bingu secretly tried out Li Qingshan's prescription. The medicinal alcohol made was indeed much better than the medicinal alcohol used in the village. Furthermore, there was no need to buy the ingredients from outsiders. Their village could gather them all. If they used it to nurture their disciples, it would not take long for the strength of Drawn Rains village to rise to another level. Li Qingshan had no objections. Those 2 prescriptions were just temporary items. There was nothing particularly precious about them, so there was no harm in giving them to others. Furthermore, he could save himself the trouble of making the medicinal alcohol. It was the best of both worlds. He handed the prescriptions to Huang Bingu, then took the stone splitter bow, mounted oxen, and slowly left. It was only when Li Qingshan's figure disappeared around the corner of a mountain path that Grandpa Zong whispered to Huang Bingu, "Hunting chief, why didn't you stop him just now? The spiritual ginseng is most likely on him. The alcohol you drank was most likely made from the spiritual ginseng, and the spiritual ginseng is most likely in the gourd at his waist." Li Qingshan had never mentioned the matter of the spiritual ginseng, but in the eyes of this experienced old hunter, he had already revealed too many clues. To Huang Bingu, who had once walked the Jianghu, these things could only be seen and understood even more clearly. Huang Bingu gazed at the mountain path that Li Qingshan had disappeared into. After a long silence, he turned his head and said, "After all, we are different from those ginseng foragers, aren't we?" Chapter 32. Grandpa Zong also showed some respect. Many mountain villages were like Ginseng King Village, and hunter villages were even more so. After all, it was much easier to be a hunter than to hunt beasts. If they encountered a lone traveler, they could kill him with 1 arrow and take the item. It was simply too easy. Ever since Huang Bingu had led Drawn Rains village, he had strictly restricted the villagers. This had never happened before. On the mountain path, Oxen said to Li Qingshan, "You gave that bottle of spiritual wine. At least 2 people have seen through the matter of the spiritual ginseng." Li Qingshan said, "I know. It's very possible that they will attack and make you stay in Drawn Rains village forever. I know that too." Li Qingshan had lived 2 lives and was not a naive teenager. He knew of the many dark sides of human nature. "But I'm willing to take this risk. In life, if I'm always careful and don't believe in others or myself, then what's the point of mastering a peerless technique?" He had some measure of his own strength and was confident that even in the worst-case scenario, he would be able to kill his way out. Furthermore, he believed that his own strength would have the effect of intimidating others. On one hand, he warmly invites me while on the other, he silently presses on his sword. Does this count as becoming mature? Li Qingshan sighed in his heart as he caressed the locust wood tablet on his waist that had the 2 words, "Nin" carved on it. However, there were still people in the world that he could wholeheartedly trust. They slowly walked along the rugged mountain path. The red, yellow, and green maple trees were like fire along the way. It was very beautiful. Li Qingshan took out his bamboo flute again and began to play it. The clear sound of the flute echoed through the autumn mountains. "Still can't find it?" The young man who was called Young Master by the swordsman asked somewhat anxiously. He had already led people to search Bailao Peak for many days and had even expanded the search area, but there was no sign of the spiritual ginseng. "Young Master, we've already brought people to flatten Ginseng King Village. The spiritual ginseng is definitely not there. They said that it must have been taken by Drawn Rains Village. Should we flatten Drawn Rains Village while we're at it?" A swordsman asked. They have great enmity with the Drawn Rains Village, so of course they would say that. They think I don't know that the Drawn Rains Village withdrew from the mountain on the day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, and then went to the north for the autumn hunt. Drawn Rains Village isn't like those country bumpkins from Ginseng King Village. Huang Bingu's archery skills were famous in Jianghu back then. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't provoke him. No one in Jianghu dared to underestimate a strong bow or crossbow. Even a first-rate master would be at a disadvantage if the arrows were fired randomly. Young master is wise. Looks like we can only wait until the next full moon. The young master felt a little proud. Suddenly his ears twitched. What's that sound? It sounds like a flute. Siren? The closest villages to here are the Ginseng King and the Reigning Horse. Let's go take a look. Oxen suddenly stopped in his tracks. Li Qingshan also saw more than 10 silhouettes lightly stepping on the treetops and rocks as they flew over from afar. Each of them had a sword on their back, and their posture was incomparably elegant. Is this light body technique? Li Qingshan exclaimed. He immediately thought of the person Little and had mentioned and raised his guard. However, this place should be quite a distance away from Bailao Peak. The young master was the first to arrive in front of Li Qingshan. His subordinates behind him loudly praised, "Young master has great light body technique." Li Qingshan saw that the young master had red lips, white teeth, and a handsome face. After being praised by his subordinates, his face was filled with an arrogant smile. Other than the calluses on his sword-wielding hands, he looked like a rich young master. He sized up the young master, but the young master didn't look at him. He glanced at him lightly and asked, "Are you from Drawn Rain's village?" Li Qingshan replied, "That's right. If not, then who are you?" "Who are you to ask for our young master's name?" A tall and skinny swordsman with a pale complexion saw that Li Qingshan was still sitting casually on the cow. His sword flashed, and he used "Immortal Guides the Way" to stab towards his face. "Get down here." He wanted to scare him off the cow and make a fool of himself. Li Qingshan's face turned cold. He slightly tilted his body, and when the sword was about to reach its end, his eyes flashed. He quickly stretched out his hand and grabbed the blade of the sword. The tall and skinny swordsman coldly snorted in his heart, "You actually dare to grab my sword? This is a fine steel treasure sword given by my sect. I only need to turn the blade of the sword and I will chop off your hand." However, when he used his strength to turn the sword, not only did he not achieve his goal, he instead twisted the fine steel treasure sword like a fried dough twist. The blade of the sword remained unmoved in Li Qingshan's hand. Even with the strength of his arm, he couldn't even match the strength of a few of Li Qingshan's fingers. Li Qingshan was enraged. There was no grudge between them, yet they wanted him to be crippled for life. These people of the pugilistic world were too vicious. Bang! With a pung sound, the blade of the sword was broken. The tall and skinny swordsman's complexion turned pale. His sword was unexpectedly broken by an unknown brat. How could he endure this? He wanted to forcefully attack with his broken sword. The young master reprimanded him, "Cheetah, get down. You are not skilled enough. Don't embarrass our Dragon's Gate Sword sect. Yes, this subordinate deserves to die. When we return, I will go to the disciplinary hall to receive my punishment." The tall and skinny swordsman named Qi did not dare to disobey. He retreated, but he looked at Li Qingshan with incomparable malice. The young master said with interest, "I did not expect to meet an external expert deep in the mountains. You are qualified to know this young master's name. Listen well, I am the Dragon's Gate Sword sect's Yang Jun." Li Qingshan shook his head, "Never heard of you before. Country bumpkin, you are ignorant and inexperienced. The sword of our Dragon's Gate Sword sect cannot be broken by others. I will not make things difficult for you. Leave behind a hand." "Which hand do you want?" The rage in Li Qingshan's chest surged. He wished that he could kill Yang Jun with one strike. Originally, he thought that even if a person who practiced martial arts could not be chivalrous, he would still be somewhat cultured. From the looks of it, he was very wrong. The good and evil of human nature all depended on a single thought. When a person had the power to toy with the lives of others, how many people could maintain their so-called humanity, not taking and doing whatever they wanted? However, this group of people could not be compared to the ginseng foragers who practiced shallow martial arts. They were true practitioners of martial arts. The ox demon forges its hide could block fists, but it could not block fine steel swords infused with inner qi. Furthermore, They all possessed movement techniques. Even if they managed to escape, it would not be easy. Yang Jun said, though, seeing how you're so young, your talent is quite good to be able to practice external martial arts to such a level. Crippling you like this is quite a pity. Why don't you become my servant? This was his true objective, as most people who practiced external martial arts were straightforward and honest. They did not have as many thoughts as people who practiced internal martial arts. In other words, their muscles grew into their brains. As a result, many masters of the Jianghu had powerful external martial artists as servants. He had always wanted to be cultured and recruit someone like that. When he saw Li Qingshan, he beamed inside. Wasn't this exactly what he was looking for? If he beat him up now, all he needed to do was give him some benefits in the future, and he would be able to raise a loyal dog. Young master, you mustn't. Cheetah tried to dissuade him in a hurry. If this kid really became the young master's servant, his status would rise. Yang Jun shot him a glance, and he immediately shut up. Another swordsman said, "Why don't you hurry up and agree? Our Dragon's Gate sword sect is renowned throughout Qingyang City. Even becoming a servant disciple is difficult. Now that the young master is promoting you, you'll reach the top in a single step. I, Li Qingshan, will not become anyone's servant." Li Qingshan emphasized each word. He came from a different world. He had the same love and hatred as the people of this world, but there was one thing that was different. He had no loyalty. He would not be loyal to anyone, no matter how benevolent, noble, or terrifyingly powerful the person was. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.